Do you think for a minute I would deny it?
No.
I would have
that
a
would be a great
riot
story.
with it.
Ted Nugent is a polarizing figure in the music world. He's known for his wild ways that can't be controlled.
I was Superman. I was the most athletic, running, jumping gazelle known to man.
But there's one thing about Ted's past that's more disturbing than the rest. It has to do with his romantic history, specifically his creepy preference for teenage girls. You guys will be shocked when you hear what disgusting things Ted allegedly did. In 1978, a then 30-year-old Ted had his eyes on a much younger love interest. Pele Massa was just 17 years old when Ted decided that he wanted to pursue a relationship with her. It's obviously extremely inappropriate, but Ted wasn't just interested in dating her. He potentially wanted to marry Pele, but because of their huge age difference, Ted couldn't pursue Pele's hand in marriage. That was until he found a bizarre loophole that would let the two of them be together. Ted was allegedly able to convince Pele's parents to declare him her legal guardian. It's kind of crazy that her parents agreed to that. It's also pretty disturbing when you think about a legal guardian having this kind of adult relationship with the person they're entrusted to take care of, especially when that's the only reason they entered into the guardian role in the first place. In an interview, Ted later explained how he was able to convince Pele's parents that this was a reasonable course of action. According to Ted, he got their seal of approval because they figured they'd rather have their teenage daughter getting intimate with a famous rock star than some young punk from her high school. What's also crazy is that when Pele looks back on it all, she doesn't even think they were really doing anything inappropriate. She says that she was underage, but the 70s were a very different time. Pele claims that it was a wild era, and what she and Ted were doing wasn't a horribly inappropriate situation in society's eyes back then. But she does understand that if anyone tried that today, especially someone famous, they'd probably be in jail. Pele also defended the nature of their relationship, saying that it was more than just physical. She claimed that she and Ted shared a very deep and intimate bond, and that Ted was a very romantic and gentle person that every woman at the time wanted to be with. Pele neglected to mention one very specific woman who wanted to be with Ted, his then wife, Sandra Jazowski, who he married in 1970. Ted and Sandra were still married when he got together with Pele, but they divorced a year later. Which makes sense. Sandra probably didn't want to be with Ted after she found out about his relationship with Pele. Even Ted must have known this relationship was pretty questionable because he denied it ever happened for many years. But he finally came clean about the situation on a special episode of VH1's Behind the Music. Although the way he rationalized it, talking about who Pele likely would have wound up with from her age group, made it sound like he was doing her and her parents a favor. That's so creepy. But it's not like Ted has been trying to hide who he really is this whole time. One of his most popular songs, the 1981 hit single Jailbait, spells out his whole thing. The lyrics explain that Ted doesn't care if a girl is only 13 years old, and it gets even more gross from there. He says that this teenage girl looks too good to be true and that he knows she's probably clean. And he says there's one little thing he's got to do to her. But the lyrics get even more specific than that, and it conjures up his relationship with Pele. Ted sings that it's alright because he asked the teenage girl's mother for permission. The song ends with a lighthearted reference to being arrested on statutory charges, so there's kind of a moral to the story. But the whole thing feels more like a joke than a real cautionary tale. And the fact that this type of lyrical content was also popping up in Ted's other songs, as well as his personal life, would seem to indicate there was no joking going on whatsoever. And Pele's story is far from an isolated event. In 2004, Courtney Love, the lead singer of the band Hole and former wife of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain, shared some shocking allegations about Ted's past. Courtney was doing an interview on the Howard Stern show when she came forward with the allegation that she had performed an adult act on Ted with her mouth. That's not exactly a bombshell of a revelation on its own, but what made it so shocking was that she apparently was just 12 years old at the time. That's so vile and disgusting. Courtney claimed that she hadn't gone through puberty yet and she didn't even have breasts at the time. She said the whole thing was sick. This would have been right around the time that Ted was 29 years old. According to Ted, he doesn't remember the incident with Courtney, which isn't a flat-out denial. He never really said that he would never have a relationship with a 12-year-old girl, just that he didn't recall it. That's extremely disturbing. What's even more disturbing about all these very real and credible stories about Ted having disgusting relationships with underage women is Ted's passion for politics. Ted has become a mouthpiece for the Republican Party in America, often making a big deal about family values in this country. You would think that Ted's lyrics about underage women alone, regardless of the stories and allegations around him, would prevent him from being taken so seriously. But sadly, people overlook all of that as part of his larger-than-life stage persona. When, if he was just some guy that lived next door to you that was doing this, you'd probably call the police immediately. And if you think that any of this is a result of substance use, think again. Ted has been an outspoken advocate for sobriety since the early 70s. As wild and as crazy as his stage shows are, they're the result of someone fully lucid and sober and under zero influence. Which is impressive in a way, until you realize that everything he allegedly did, he mostly did while sober. Unfortunately, the 70s was a very different time, and these horrible, upsetting things probably happen more often than we think. Fortunately for everyone, things have changed a lot since then. But Ted's story is still insane. I mean, even back then, not everyone was so out in the open and proud about these kinds of actions as to make them into hit records. So Ted's case is just really shocking. And it's crazy that people aren't talking about all this more. But what do you guys think? Were Pele's parents wrong for letting Ted adopt her? Is Ted's song Jailbait gross to listen to? Let me know in the comments below.